If you consider yourself a fan of music rhythm games, especially if you're a fan of Guitar Hero or Rock Band games, you owe it to yourself to check out Frequency. As a matter of fact, without Frequency, there would be no Guitar Hero or Rock Band games. Gameplay is kept pretty simple. There's only 3 different notes to hit, and you either use the shoulder buttons or the face buttons on the controller to hit them. All the different instruments are kept on their own track, so the drums, the guitar, the vocals, synthesizers, they're all kept on their own track, and you play each of them individually. Overall, the music's pretty diverse. For the most part, it's a lot of hard rock and kind of techno electronic sounds. Definitely check it out if you're a fan of the genre. I remember renting Devil May Cry basically just when it came out, and I just remember being blown away by every factor about the game. First of all, the visuals at the time, and they still are, simply amazing. The camera, for the most part, was really sweeping and cinematic. The gameplay was fast and frantic. I never played a game in that style before. Granted, this was before God of War. Being able to freely combo between your guns and your sword, and being able to transform later on, everything just had a great balance to it. And, a lot of games these days owe it to Devil May Cry for kind of creating this over-the-top, action-adventure, beat-em-up style of game. While it has been many, many years since I've actually played the original Devil May Cry, I think all the memories that I have originally playing the game really stand up and make this a worthy choice. Harvest Moon: Save the Homeland was the very first Harvest Moon game that I'd ever played in the series, and little did I know just how addicted I was going to get to farming my crops and milking my cows and racing my horses and picking up the eggs from under my chickens and, well, yeah, I guess you get the idea. But needless to say, this is the kind of series where you look at it and you go, how the heck can that be fun? And then when you go to play it, you're completely hooked. It's really hard for me to explain, how easy it is to either hate these games or love them. The Harvest Moon series is one of those love or hate series. But once you start, sort of building up your economy and getting, a good amount of crops to harvest, and you get some animals to tend to, and you get this sense of progression where you're always advancing within the game and making more money and establishing your farm and, growing everything, and it clicked, and this is a game that I love. I don't think anybody could have predicted that Katamari Damacy would be where it is today, with sequels on the PlayStation 3, the PSP, and a sequel on the PS2. This series has really gone so far from where it originated as a 1999 budget game that looked way too weird for an American audience. I mean, the cover itself had cows and rainbows. I mean, that's just a weird combination right there. And then you look at it, and if you've never seen the series before, you're probably saying to yourself, what the heck is going on? Well, the gameplay is pretty simple. You just use both joysticks, and you roll around a ball and collect stuff from all around the planet and the world, and you try and make it as big as you can within the time limit in the levels, but it's just so wacky and addictive that I highly recommend this game to anybody that's never tried it out before. You might just find your next hidden gem. Anytime somebody comes to me and wants recommendations for PlayStation 2 RPGs, the original Shadow Hearts is always one of my most highly regarded titles that I always recommend. First of all, I like to call this a horror RPG. I've never really played anything quite like it with its style. Everything is very gothic based. The settings and the characters and the story, it's all very dark and very interesting. One of the most standout moments in the game for me was when I made it to a town made up of cannibals where the ground is littered with piles of skulls and blood, and it was just very creepy and atmospheric. But perhaps the next best thing about Shadow Hearts is the combat system, where you have this circle where it has a line that spins around, and you have to stop it at certain parts while it spins around to basically make the best of your attack turn. So there's certain sections in red where if you hit it just at the right time, you'll make your attack that much more powerful. And it's a highly addictive battle system that truly stands up today, and it's one of my favorite turn-based RPG battle systems out there. I'd highly recommend this one to RPG fans. When it comes to old-school, retro-style turn-based RPGs on the PlayStation 2, Dragon Quest VIII is without a doubt as good as they come. This was actually the very first game that I played in the Dragon Quest Dragon Warrior series, and I have to say I'm really glad I did, because what I found was a really deep and rich, expansive world with some excellent characters, great writing, great voice acting, amazing graphics, which, by the way, this was the first in the series to sort of incorporate a fully 3D realized world with some excellent cel-shaded graphics and a musical score that's nothing short of phenomenal. I was so blown away by this game that when I got it, I just couldn't stop playing. So if you're looking for an RPG that's going to keep you busy for a really long time, look no further than Dragon Quest VIII. This is definitely as good as they come when it comes to traditional RPGs on the PlayStation 2. What happens when you take gameplay elements of The Legend of Zelda and pair it with a graphical style that mimics Japanese folklore and watercolor paintings? Well, you get Okami on the PlayStation 2. I remember hyping myself so much for Okami before it came out, and it definitely didn't disappoint. The biggest gameplay addition to Okami that's really unique to this series is that you can take a celestial brush, freeze the gameplay in the game, and draw on the screen, and this will affect the gameplay, so you can use this during boss battles or regular battle encounters, or just in the environment itself to, say, draw a bridge and open up a new path, or damage an enemy. It's just a really great gameplay element that really lends itself well to the game's art style, which is nothing short of beautiful. This is one of the best looking games on the PlayStation 2. Even before God of War came out, I was so confident that this game was going to blow me away that I actually purchased a store standee for the game before I even owned it. So needless to say, the day the game came out, I was there to pick it up, and I was going to finish it in a single sitting that day, but I actually had to force myself to stop playing the game so that I wouldn't beat it in one day, because I wanted the experience to last as long as it could. But what God of War did was, it basically perfected what action-adventure games had been trying to do for all those years. It gave us tight controls, an excellent camera, a fun combo system, graphics that were just unmatched back then. And of course the game was just fun as hell. First of all, I was also a huge fan of the Greek mythology that it was based on. You put all that together and you've got a series that today is basically looked upon as the standard for all action-adventure games. The original Dark Cloud was one of the most addictive games I had played on the PlayStation 2. This is actually the only game that I can recall where I would set my alarm to go off earlier before waking up for school, just because I simply could not wait to wake up and play the game for a little bit longer. There are really only two main gameplay styles to Dark Cloud, the most abundant of which is when you're in the dungeons, which are randomly generated with items, and some of the items that you collect are actually pieces that you can use to go back and build the towns in the game, which would be the other gameplay element, where you actually were able to craft and construct your own towns where you can place, your shop over here or the water here. It was a pretty cool element, but the main factor that was really addictive for me was the weapon synthesis and leveling up your weapons and being able to create the next best sword, fusing them together. Some people are put off by the fact that it's pretty simple to fuse weapons together and you have to keep them maintained so they don't break while you're in the dungeons, and you have to drink water to keep yourself hydrated so you don't die, but if you give it a chance, you might just find an RPG that you can't put down. I have to stand by my opinion of Final Fantasy XII in that an RPG doesn't always need a story that grips you from beginning to end, or characters that are always likable. Yeah, I'm talking about Vaughn. But what Final Fantasy XII does have is gameplay that I felt really advanced the series. Yes, I came from playing Final Fantasy XI, so the gameplay style of Final Fantasy XII was pretty familiar to me, but I felt that the customization that the game allowed in terms of crafting your party and being able to craft their AI in terms of how they acted was unbelievably fun and addictive. The battles were fast-paced. The world was huge and expansive. There were tons of quests to go on. The way you leveled up your characters was a little bit questionable because in the end, all the characters turn out to have all the same stats essentially, but there's no denying that you have a great sense of customization and control over your party. This next statement may be hard for many of you to understand, but Final Fantasy XII is my favorite PlayStation 2 Final Fantasy game.